the voice. There's the voice. And I gather that Facebook will be preparing.
Mhm.
There we are. We're live. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere. Okay, everybody. Um, welcome to History Matters and So Does Coffee. Um, today, almost not surprisingly, oh wait, and I should say it's episode 266.
Yes.
This is the second week in a row that I have some
Mhm.
vague sense of what episode it is. We're going to be talking about how popes have always been political in the United States. Um, but before we get to that, I want to say something, and then I'm going to turn to my partner in crime, who will also say a number. Actually, why don't you introduce yourself first, Annie, and tell us the real
Sure.
thing,
Hi,
and then
everybody.
I'll have something to say. Yeah.
I'm Annie Evans from New American History, and it's my great joy to be with you guys on Fridays. My role is to kind of check out the chat as Joanne's talking for about 30 minutes each day. I monitor both the chat, the Q&A, and then when Joanne's done giving a few remarks each Friday, then I'll come back and I'll field your questions through the Q&A. So please put questions about today's topic in the Q&A. We'll get to those in a little bit later. Back to Joanne.
Okay. Thank you very much, partner in crime. Um, I just wanted to make a brief statement at the outset here, and it's something I've said before, and I'm just going to say it again just because. I guess just because this community means so much to me. When we are going full speed, and I'm blathering away, certainly during the first half hour when I'm blathering away, but then even after that, when we're in the Q&A period, I can't follow very well what the heck is going on in chat. And so I don't know how many weeks I've been like, wow, it's going fast because I'll see something go whizzing by and I'll think like I could comment on that and then it's gone. So I can't tell what's going on. I don't know who's saying what to who. Sometimes I can sense that there's like a vibe happening in which some people are less happy than they might normally be, and that's about as far as I know. So I just wanted to say, particularly in the times that we live in, um, we're here to really engage with each other. And that doesn't mean we can't ask questions of each other or disagree with each other. But, I mean, you all know this. I'm saying this because I feel like I should say this because I care about this community so much. You can ask questions in different ways. So you can ask a question and say, I always thought blah. And then people can respond to that. Or you can say, that's not true, blah, which isn't a question and which might get people riled up. And we're all prone right now to be more riled up than usual. And I can certainly vouch that I am getting riled up at things that are not rile worthy. Could see me calculating how to say that as it came out of my mouth. So at any rate, I just say that because this community matters so much. And I really am proud of the community. And I feel that it's an example of something that so many other people could and should be doing. So I just wanted to offer I guess it's appropriate talking about the Pope, talking about peace in our community. I just wanted to kind of have a little reminder of that before we launch off our conversation today. Okay,
Okay, I'll be back after the talk.
excellent. Okay, now, and I have to say right at the outset, and this probably makes me an old, but whenever the word Pope pops into my head, I think of the Pope and the pizza and Saturday Night Live. So that's just been going through my head. And I'm confessing this to you now. And now that I've confessed it, I know I will not say it. So thank you very much. But that keeps going through my head. At any rate, on a more serious note, um, what occurred to me as I was watching what was taking place, and then I was looking, I happened to come home and put the TV on, and I could see everything that was happening, crowd of people and the cheering and the pomp and circumstance and everything else. And I hadn't been very focused on the fact that, of course, there needs to be a new pope selected. I just hadn't thought of everything that comes along with that selection and the selection process and what it means. So I was kind of appreciating the ceremony and the meaning of it as I was watching it. And then I saw people responding to the selection. Now, for those of you who have not kept up with what's going on by now, I think everyone knows, but Robert Prevost, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, the first American Pope, was selected, and he has taken the name Leo the 14th. So he is Pope Leo the 14th. And what I immediately began to see was some people on the right getting very upset. And I gather it's because, and if you look, if you're Googling around either now or after we speak, there is a Twitter account, or was a Twitter account in his name, that was anti Trump and anti-Vance, not in a crazy way, but making it clear that he disagreed a lot with some policies. And as I was looking today, the media is not, they're saying the account in his name, because no one absolutely knows whether it's him or whether it's not him. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But it's very clear that he is not MAGA, that's for sure. And so I began to see a lot of people, or at least things began to float in front of my vision from people on the right who are very, very upset that, to them, it's an anti-Trump pope, although we don't really know. We can guess at some of the things he stands for, but that's not apparent yet. But at any rate, someone complained that now we have a quote, woke Marxist pope. And that is what led me to think about the fact that, popes are, it's a political position in addition to being a spiritual position. But in the United States, there's been an extra bonus bit of politics always associated with Catholicism and the Pope. And that comment about someone getting very upset about a woke Marxist Pope had me thinking immediately about the long American history of people being upset about Catholicism, pushing back against Catholicism, hating the idea that there's a pope, thinking that the pope is trying to take over in the United States. There's a long, long, long history of that that goes back to the revolution, and depending on how we want to define the United States, but certainly even before that point, with people being upset by Catholicism and by the Pope. And this is the extra political boost that I was talking about, because the way that the American colonies, or at least the 13 American colonies, except for Maryland, I'll come back to Maryland, were largely Protestant. And so Catholicism was seen by, particularly in New England, Puritan New England, Catholicism was seen as almost like a political organization where the Pope is at the head, and that somehow or other they are trying to take over the West, trying to take over the United States. The United States responded particularly strongly to this because the United States saw itself, as we've talked about many times here, as an experimental nation. It was a republic, something new and different, not a monarchy. How many times have we talked about Americans with their panic about drifting back into monarchy? You can imagine that that population is not going to be very excited about the idea of a pope who has some kind of authority over Americans. That's going to, again, feel tyrannical, feel monarchical, feel not small r Republican, feel not in the spirit of however people at the time defined democratic freedom or liberty. You can understand how politically this religious figure would be of a major threat to many Americans for a very long time. So that's the kind of American extra bonus of anti-Catholic bigotry, I guess you could say, is this fear that somehow or other Catholicism and the Pope are about taking over this country that isn't Catholic, is largely Protestant, and they're just going to get their hands in, and then we're doomed. Oh no! I think I actually wrote in my notes here. Oh no, they're taking over as a response to the Quebec Act. I'll come back to that momentarily. But at any rate, that for a long time was the fear, and continues in some way to be the fear that there's an outside authority, an outside power that supposedly Americans are more loyal to, and maybe has larger goals and wants to take over or get his hands in the West, whatever. There's a lot of anti-Catholic conspiracy theories floating around out there, and have been for a very long time. But because of America being this sort of anti-monarchical, small r Republican nation, that whole idea of a pope and the hierarchy of the Catholic Church has an extra bonus power, and people have an extra burst of hate for what Catholicism and the Pope represent. Now, I did sort of think, given being an early American historian, I first went back to the Revolution because you can see a lot of anti-Catholicism coming out in part in the early phase of when the Revolution hasn't quite become a revolution yet, when the British Parliament passes the Quebec Act this is 1774. And they're trying to take this French province of Quebec and incorporate it into the British Empire. And so the Quebec Act um, tried to allow for things like the French Civil Code and the Roman Catholic Church to maintain authority in Quebec, even as Quebec went into becoming part of the British colonial system. So the idea was, sort of accommodating people in Quebec to the idea of being a British colony. The North American 13 colonies, the American colonies, did not respond well to this because they thought immediately, oh no, this is what I wrote, oh no, taking over in capital letters, as if I needed a reminder. They were panicked that this meant that somehow or other their freedom was under attack because the British had come in, had declared Catholicism okay. What did that mean? And were ruling on what their government was allowed to be. What did that mean? So on religious levels, on civil levels, on political levels, in a whole bunch of ways, American colonists responded to the Quebec Act by thinking, oh no, the Pope and the Catholics are coming and they're coming for us and they're going to try and take over. Bad, 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 bad. So you can if you go back and you find pamphlets from the period, or if you Google Quebec Act, I'm sure you'll see a lot of ranting by American colonists. Now, I mentioned Maryland a little earlier because there was one colony that was particularly Catholic friendly, and that was Maryland, which was started by a man who had converted to Catholicism, um, Calvert, I believe, Lord Calvert. And he was given land and he was given basically was not told he shouldn't be a Catholic in Maryland. So Maryland was always seen as a Catholic friendly colony. And Baltimore, particularly, was seen as kind of the Catholic epicenter of Catholicism in the United States for a while. Um, the first American diocese was founded in Baltimore, 1789, right when the country starts. So Maryland, in its own way, was like this little place where it was good to be a Catholic. Supposedly, roughly 10% of Maryland in the time period I'm talking about here was Catholic. Supposedly, there are some counties in Maryland where as many as a third of the people were Catholic. So that really would have been different from most of the other colonies at the time. Now, John Carroll became the Bishop of Baltimore, 1789. He was able to do this, and in a way, this kind of helps explain how Catholicism got its grip in the new nation in a positive way. He, was someone who came to prominence when in the Revolutionary America generally. So he wasn't seen as an outsider, he was seen as an insider. And he, among other things, he began Georgetown, what is now Georgetown University, partly because he wanted to recruit candidates for the priesthood independently of Rome, so that there would be Catholic priests in America who would not be foreign trained, who would not be from outside of the United States. And he made it really clear that he saw the Pope as a spiritual leader with no other kind of authority. And I'm going to come back to that momentarily because others who have been in a situation in the United States where people have been suspecting them because they're Catholic, that has been an important way in which they've tried to carve out a space where being anti-Catholic is being anti-religious, and that Catholicism doesn't mean political loyalty. But as I said, long history of this, beginning of the 19th century, again, still strong anti-Catholicism. You have, for example, in the 1820s, the beginning of the American Home Missionary Society. They partly, and again, home missionaries. So they're talking about in the United States. And they partly wanted to spread Christianity, meaning Protestant Christianity, and they partly wanted to stop the Pope from extending his political domination into the United States. And this was active. It wasn't like just a crank movement, that it was doing things. Apparently, among other things, they petitioned the House of Representatives to ask Congress to investigate whether there was a plot. There's always a plot to subvert civil and religious liberties by sending Catholics to the United States. This gets into another problem which we are currently wrestling with and goes back to this question as well. The question of being anti-Catholic is also bound up in immigration because immigrants coming, particularly from Ireland, but not only from Ireland, often were Catholic. And in the 19th century, you begin to get waves of immigrants coming. So it felt to some Americans that there are like waves of Catholic people coming to the United States. And some people decided that, oh, this must be the Pope sending an army of Catholics to the United States to somehow affect the United States and its freedoms, which sounds a little bonkers, but in the grand American tradition of conspiracy theories and of American fears of falling into something that would be easy to fall into, monarchy and all these other such things. You can see how some people would find that kind of conspiracy appealing in some way. So at any rate, you had the American Home Missionary Society, which tried for a while to spread Christianity and do what it could do, maybe stop Catholics from voting, whatever they were trying to do, stop Catholics from having influence that they felt was undue in the United States. Then you have the Know Nothing Party. So that's a party. It's not a society. That's actually a party, which was a nativist party. And it was anti-Catholic. It was anti-Irish. Apparently, it was born in some kind of a nativist fraternal organization around 1850, which is around the time the Republican Party is born as well, interestingly. But really, its ideology was rooted in anti-Catholicism and hostility towards immigrants generally. One of their slogans was, quote, Americans must rule America. Says a lot, particularly in today's climate. And it grew really quickly. So within just a couple of years, there were close to 1 million members of the Know Nothing Party. People were like, yeah, nativism. Let's get the immigrants and the Catholics. Thank you, United States. This was clear. It was a trend. I have an Abraham Lincoln quote at the time, and this is before he's up and coming at this point. He's not president. He said, as a nation, we began by declaring that all men are created equal. We now practically read it, all men are created equal except Negroes. When the know-nothings get control, it will read, all men are created equal except Negroes and foreigners and Catholics. So it's pretty clear what the message is. Now, interestingly, what brought down the know-nothings in part was the fight over slavery, was the fact that the it divided actually a lot of parties in this period. It divided the Whig Party as well. Like some people were against slavery, some people didn't want to be against slavery. The slavery issue took over, swallowed up a lot of other issues, and that's part of what brought the know-nothings down. Now, I'm going to move my piece of paper here because it's getting in my way. There we go. Clearly, in time, anti-Catholicism loses that kind of potent grip that it had, but it doesn't fully go away. And you can see that in part by thinking about John F. Kennedy running for president when it was a big deal. It was a big issue that he was Catholic. And he had to very assertively, aggressively come out and say something about that. And the reason why, again, people were suspect about it is because, as someone at the time put it, we must keep the presidency away from someone who confesses to a foreign earthly power. Oh no, there's a foreign authority that he is loyal to, and he'll put that authority above all other authority, and we can't have our country being run by a person who is looking to another authority with their loyalty. They're not loyal to the United States first. That's, according to the people who believe this, scary for all kinds of reasons. Um, the National Association of Evangelicals at the time, when Kennedy is running, said any country the Roman Catholic Church dominates suppresses the rights of evangelicals. For that reason, thinking Americans view with alarm, thinking Americans, the possible election of a Roman Catholic as president of the United States. So again, people are worried about repression, suppression. They're worried about a foreign power coming in and taking over. Anti-Catholicism is partly bound up with America's ideas about what liberty and freedom are. Americans trying in the early period, trying to define itself against the old world. America being scared about outsiders, even though it's a country created of, in a sense, all outsiders. But regardless, the Pope is political, not just because as a figure, the Pope weighs in on things that are political or aren't, but again, can have a political influence, but because the position itself, and for that matter, the Catholicism, were seen as having deep and fundamental political repercussions in the United States for a very long time. And so that was why, my historian radar perked up when I saw someone, and I want to say it was in all capital letters. I can't promise you that, but whatever it was that I saw, it was someone screaming about, oh no, we have a woke Marxist Pope. And Marxism sort of gets you back in where there's like some foreign way of thinking that's going to take over and destroy America. Woke just representing anything that this person doesn't like. I think it's bound up in the vagary of woke. But at any rate, there, in a way, you get an echo of, not just that Catholics are bad, but that the Pope as a figure is dangerous and might get his hands into the United States and might try to do things here that are bad or dangerous. Um, I don't know enough about him and his politics to say anything about what he will or won't do, and I wouldn't anyway. I'm a historian. But it certainly seems that in some ways he's following in Pope Francis's model, right? As far as being more liberal in his tendencies. I don't know that. I'm speaking in a sense out of turn here. But regardless, he already now is politicized for some people in the United States, and I suspect that that's not going to change. That people will be looking at him and seeing him as like siding with one side or another. I have no idea. I suspect that sometimes he will side with one side and seemingly side with another side. Again, I don't know enough about his policies, um, but the interesting factor, not just that the Pope is woke and Marxist, but he's a woke Marxist American Pope. So that means, I'm sure to many people looking on, that he might have like a special influence or special power or special connection with the United States that some people might find threatening. You can certainly see, given everything that I just said, why the idea of an American Pope would really have not been popular in America. Now, there are people who are very proud of the fact that there's an American Pope. And that's good that people can be proud of that fact. But you can certainly see the landscape uh, on which people who want to point to the new pope with conspiracy theories and tie them into politics. So these won't be just religious conspiracy theories, these will be political conspiracy theories, sort of yanked and probably bound up with religion, but still, you can see the stage kind of being set for that coming down the road. So I suppose I would say be prepared for that. It won't be surprising if and when it happens. Again, long history of people being scared that the Pope will have influence. This is the new factor is the first American Pope. So I don't know how that plays out, and that will be interesting to watch and to see. But certainly, beyond the idea that there's a first and we're witnessing a first, I suppose the thing to think about, and I tend in my conversation part of our Friday mornings try to offer like some way in which what I'm talking about can help you process the present. In this case, knowing the background of Catholicism and anti-Catholicism in the United States and the background of how political Catholicism has always been and how it's always been assumed it's not just about religion, it's about politics. I think that history can at least inform you or alert you to some of what we might be seeing going forward. Again, I have no idea what we're going to be seeing, but there are certainly many models in the past for how Americans have grappled just generally with the idea of a pope and the fact that Americans would be loyal to someone besides local leaders. Now that this guy's an American, thinking with historian brain thinks this could be really interesting how people interpret that kind of religious power being given to an American at a moment when America itself is so divided and religion is bound up in those divisions. So I'll sort of next week on what's happening with the Pope. I'm not going to talk about it next week, but my point is we'll see what happens. We'll see how this develops, but it's worth knowing America's history with the many ways in which the Pope is political, and then our extra boost of having an American Pope. So that is my point for this morning. Mug. Okay. For those of us who have not been here before, I want to move my notes away so that I can see everyone else bigger. Every week, I have a mug that in one way or another reflects on the theme. And as I say every week, I do not have 266 mugs. I have a lot of mugs. But I really this morning kind of panicked. I was like, what am I gonna have? I don't think I have a religious mug. What can I possibly do? And then I realized I have a mug, Jewish currents, Bernie. So I managed to find a way to bind up politics and religion. It's Bernie. It's that image, which immediately became iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, it crossed my mind when I was preparing for what I wanted to say this morning. There was a point during Trump's first term, when he said something about your country, pointing to Jews. He was speaking to a group of Jews and he said, your country, meaning Israel, which is the same kind of weirdness, right? Someone backed me up on this by like doing some Googling, but I remember it because I remember feeling really angry. And I'm sure I had things to say about it, but that is a similar idea with even less to, Jews don't follow commands from Israel. And this is a whole different issue, which I'm not going to get into here at all. But same idea that somehow or other Jews are more loyal to another country than they are to their own. That's an echo of the same kind of thing we're talking about here.
Mm.
Okay, I am now going to open chat so I can follow along.
Right. Well, I'm going to start off with our friend Sydney, who is a undergrad student in Georgia that I got to hang out with a couple of summers ago. And Sydney asks, what does it say about the political climate that a high-ranking religious leader actively despises a political figure? Does the current Pope stand on President Trump mean MAGA is going to turn against Catholics?
I have no idea. And at this point, excuse me, I don't even know if his Twitter account is his Twitter account. Maybe it is, in which case he's, I think what I saw was the Pope tweeted. That's just a phrase that how many people have uttered that phrase before yesterday? That supposedly the Pope tweeted about separating children from parents at the border in some way and pointed to Trump's policies and talking about that. I think he said there's some tweet in which he said J.D. Vance is wrong, having something to do about ranking how much you do or don't love different kinds of people. Again, I have no deep knowledge of this at all. So he did clearly have political opinions, which is why, it's clear he's not MAGA. If it's his Twitter account, I don't know. And I also don't know, worth thinking about. It might be useful for some people, regardless of what the Pope says or does or thinks, to set him up as some kind of figure to rally against if there's political advantage to that. I don't know. I have no idea. But given that it's political, and given that he's American, and given where we are right now as a nation, and the degree to which unprecedented things, and I say that as a historian, are happening in clusters, who knows? But it's worth thinking about the fact that he may very well become, for some Americans, a kind of political pawn. I don't know. And I have to say, even if he were not, even if the Pope was not American, this is a tricky time to be Pope, just given in the world, democracies being supported or not supported, and all of the political turmoil going on in the world, and then the United States. Um, it's going to be a tricky time to be Pope. I read somewhere that the reason why there hasn't been a Pope before, in part, is because the idea was that the United States was so unquestionably a superpower that you didn't want to give a superpower also the Pope. And that now that we don't seem as superpowerish as we once did, maybe it feels safe to have an American Pope. I have no grounding for that, but I did see other people saying it. It'll be interesting to find out what the logic is, if there is a set logic, as far as having an American Pope. But that was an interesting theory on some people's part.
Maybe that'll be Conclave, the sequel.
Oh, you just know
American Pope.
how many movies. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is from Martha Wales, and I don't remember Martha asking a question before. So if this is your first question, Martha, thank you. Martha asks, how will liberal leaders such as the Pope and the new Prime Minister of Canada affect what is going on in the US?
So, I mean, again, that's unclear. And I don't know so much about the Pope's politics. We do know, well, what we know is that in Canada and in Australia, among other places, um, opposition to President Trump and what he represents helped elect more liberal leaders. That's speaking as a historian, such an interesting time.
Hmm.
You know, so I don't know actually the answer to that question, but there we go. Someone says Heather's letter talks about this new pope believes versus their Catholic views. So yeah, she already has plunged into it and researched it and knows more than I'm giving you right now. But at any rate, I don't know. Um, the religion is so forward in the United States in a way that it is not always. Christianity and being a Christian nation, that's always been an argument in one way or another, but now we're in a sort of different zone as far as that argument is concerned. I don't know what the influence will be, but the politics is going to shape that. Oh, that's right. Someone chat to everyone if you're here. Be sure that when you chat, it's to everyone and not just to hosts and panelists, because I won't see it. So
Yeah, Katya, you are only chatting to host and panelists. There might be others, but yep, make sure. All right. Kathleen B., who's with us almost every week, I think. We love Kathleen. She says, can you explain revolutionary theology? She heard a quote from a conservative think tank that troubled her. She said, it seems we need both peace and justice now, was the quote. The people and the justice stuff I don't like. Basically, it's Pope Francis's credo, basic revolutionary theology of Latin America that has lots and lots of Marxist influence. Is it peace and social justice, or is he just talking about something else? Or she said, is it MAGA messaging?
well, here's a great example of what I said, right? Because it's a logical question to ask, and it's remarkable that justice is such a charged term right now that a pope talking about justice might be bound up with the idea of social justice, which might be bound up with the idea of social warriors, and which might be bound up with the idea of Marxism. And we have no evidence of anything being bound up with anything yet. So can I say that anything he says does not have messaging to it? Can I say that definitively? No, but it seems to me a man just taking power, who knows what he faces, would not necessarily, if he was a smart man, begin sending out political signals. There's a reason why he didn't speak English when he stood up and spoke to the crowd, right? He spoke Spanish, he spoke Latin, he spoke Italian. He did not speak English, and that was a good choice. I'm not here as an American. I'm here as your Pope, who spent decades living in Peru. So, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that's precisely the kind of question and the kind of reasoning and logic that we should be alert for and not necessarily assume or believe, and really think about. So raising that question is good because it's just the sort of thing that we should really interrogate and evaluate. It will be, again, easy for people who see the Catholic Church as this hierarchical, organized, controlling entity, that they're sending out messaging, that they're lining people up, that they're whatever it is that they're doing that Americans have always assumed the Catholic Church is doing. But we should think before believing, I guess, which is always good. We always want to think before believing. But particularly in this case, given America's history with this and the degree to which people just fall right into this, um, that the question is wonderful because it so highlights the precise thing that I'm talking about this morning that will be happening.
Kathleen only asks great questions.
Oh, and I do want to say, Andy says, for Catholics and Leo, justice isn't complete without social justice. Oh no, and well, then here we go too, right? What are we talking about when we say social justice? Well, if you're talking about justice among peoples in society, yeah, right? But if you're talking about it as a buzz phrase, social justice warrior, then you're in a zone where it's no longer about meaning or definitions, it's about implications and politics. So, the fact that using the word peace or using the word justice might seem political, that's more about us than it is about the Pope. But it really is a way to alert us, or should alert us, to the way in which we are interpreting and how others are interpreting whatever this Pope is doing.
Right. Our good friend Miranda from Illinois asks, as someone who is too young to remember JFK's election, would it be fair to equate his election to president and its impact on the Irish Catholic community to the Obama election in 2008?
Interesting.
Hmm.
I actually, I can finally say I'm too young to remember. Woohoo! I'm never too young for anything. So I don't know what the Catholic response was. And it's true that all kinds of Americans, um, Black Americans, Americans of color, and a lot of other kinds of Americans were beyond excited about the fact of having our first Black president in the United States. Um, what's interesting is, and I'm pausing because what I'm thinking about is, the times when, who was the Connecticut Jewish vice presidential candidate whose name has gone right out of my head? Um, can someone? Lieberman. Lieberman. Thank you, Joe Lieberman. So when Lieberman came forward as someone who was being considered for the vice presidency, most Jews responded by saying, "Oh no, this is going to be bad for the Jews." Like it's gonna highlight the Jews. People are gonna hate the idea of Jews having power. The Jews are gonna suffer. Now I can say, as someone who's Jewish, that's partly a Jewish response. You learn that in world history, like when Jews get made prominent, bad things happen to Jews. But given that, I don't know if there was a uniform Catholic response. I don't know if some Catholics had a response along the lines of what a lot of Jewish people did to Lieberman. I don't know. Um, I can only speak about the amazing response to Obama's election, but that would be a really interesting, like, senior essay topic for an undergraduate. Like, what was the Catholic response
Mm.
to the campaigning and election of a Catholic president?
A couple of folks in the chat who were old enough to remember that said it was a big deal when they,
That would not surprise me
yeah.
at all. Um, who is saying this? Julia. Right. Says my mom always asks, but is it good for the Jews? Yeah, if you're Jewish, you're always thinking about the fact that it's going to be bad for the Jews because it's always bad for the Jews in some way or another. And also, my parents were actually my father was totally guilty of this. He was so proud when some famous person, an entertainer, someone in a movie, was Jewish. Immediately, like, he's Jewish. Like, always such a point. He's Jewish. Like, it's one of us. And look, there was always that component sort of mixed in too. So there's obviously a pride if you feel like you're in a minority group or in a group that has been disadvantaged and shoved aside in a lot of ways, and then you suddenly see like someone in power from that disadvantaged community being proud. But it's like I don't know if it's an inside joke with Jews. It's certainly Jews laugh about that because so many of them do it so often. I think that was even in that song, the Saturday Night Live song, the Hanukkah song.
Oh, Adam Sandler's Hanukkah
I
song.
think
Yeah.
there's even a line in that song that does this too. But at any rate, so my point here is I don't know. I'm sure there will be many American Catholics will be very excited. And obviously, there are a lot of Americans who are very excited. But this is all unfolding in real time as we sit here and go forward.
Lenore said that as an Italian American raised Roman Catholic in the 50s, that they had pictures of JFK in their home and that he was highly respected and revered. It makes me laugh because we had an aunt, those commemorative plates, like dishes you can buy that have famous people, like they sell them late at night on TV.
Oh
My
yeah.
had a bunch of the presidents, but she only had the Republicans. She would not have the Democrats. So as a little kid, we would go there and I'd say, well, where's President Carter? And then everybody would be quiet. It was like dinner conversation stopped and they're like, be quiet. And I'm like, President Carter's missing. And my mother had to like take me outside and explain. That's how I learned what political parties were.
Ooh.
Because Aunt Avis didn't have certain plates on her wall. All
And
right. We've
people are
got,
right. People are singing tribute to Adam Sandler in chat.
oh, yeah.
And I think
Oh, yeah. Okay, our good friend Ann Mosley, also from Illinois. Illinois is representing today. Ann says every U.S. president since World War II met with Billy Graham until Billy Graham passed away in 2018. Has there been a pope who ministered or advised the president? Hmm.
well, I mean, obviously presidents have been meeting with popes.
Mhm.
Um, and we see that, right? I mean, we saw that with Biden. We saw that with Trump. So that happens. It will happen again. But as far as advising, so I would have a, I don't, I will have a two-part answer. One part answer would be, it might have happened and it would be probably something that would not be widely advertised for all of the reasons that I've talked about this morning. I can't say definitively yes or no, but it's certainly not something that could happen outright um, for any number of different reasons. There might be people who I would assume if it happened, it's a 20th century phenomenon more than anything else, but I don't know that definitively, but it would not be advertised. And it might not have really ever happened in a concrete way that it feels like that question is being asked at all. I don't know. And again, what if a president, well, we haven't had very, Catholic president. If you're talking about a Catholic president wanting to speak with the Pope on a spiritual matter, think about the ways in which that might automatically be seen as political. It's you can see how well, like the title of today's episode, popes are political, right? It's hard to separate that position of power and a position of power that is has power all over the world in countries all over the world. That's a distinctive kind of a thing, and it breeds distinctive kinds of fears.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine asks, Will the new pope's background as a mathematician or a Peruvian naturalized citizen or Creole Haitian ancestry make a difference, pro or con politically, or is all of that just unimportant?
We do not know. I mean, I do think the fact that he had this ministry in Peru, that he was there for decades, um, that is a boon, that is a good thing. Like if you're going to have an American pope, it's an American pope who has spent a lot of time not in America, and or not in the United States, and I think that is good. That works in his favor. But will any of these things have an influence? I don't know. I didn't know about his mother's sort of Creole, his grandparents' sort of Creole background. I didn't know that till this morning when I was reading. I have no idea. I mean, I really don't. There will be people who will find, who will have a need to point to some of those things for their own purposes, right? There will be people who, for whatever purpose, political, religious, otherwise, are going to want to grab at some of those things and use them, probably not for good reasons, for positive reasons, but I don't know. So there will probably be people trying to make that an issue, but the influence that that will have, and who will do that, or if it will happen, that I can't. I don't know. Who knows? I do not know. You have a Jewish American here, like talking about the Pope. I thought about that
Only
this
in America, right?
only in America. I'm like, I can talk about history, I can talk about Catholicism, and I can talk generally about the Pope. But yeah, but sometimes an outsider is a great person to talk about something because you see things. Something, I
And,
mean,
and I will say that last night the geographers were going nuts because they were very offended that people kept saying it was the first American pope because we have had popes from South America
I
and
know.
the whole claiming of the word America as only
No, but
yours.
we're the United. I saw that too, but we are the United
Yeah,
States of America.
right.
We're not
I know.
United.
I'm just
I know you
saying.
know that, but this I didn't. I held myself back
Yep.
yesterday
Yep.
from responding because I was like, we don't call ourselves United Statesians.
Right.
Call
Right.
ourselves United States of America. We're Americans, so I
Nope.
get it. North
Yep.
America, South America, like someone yelled when I said first American Pope, someone yelled back at me on some social media platform,
Oh
don't
yeah.
claim the word America. And I didn't respond, but it was like,
Yeah. People from
it's,
Latin America, especially the geographers, but geographers here in North America also were going nuts. Of course, that's who I follow, so I heard probably more of it than the average bear. But okay, Banjo Donna, my buddy
Kim
says, oh,
says,
that's an after party question. We'll go back to that. Help me
Kim,
remember the bird question.
Kim says American popes in the Gulf of America. So
Oh, don't get me started on that, people.
no, no,
Especially now with the whole Arabia thing,
yeah.
renaming.
I did want to say, oh, there you go, Clinton. Modern presidents consult the Pope and Vatican diplomatically, and that actually makes perfect sense. As I said, feels to be like a modern phenomenon.
Yeah. Okay. Help me remember Banjo Donna has an after party question about birds for you.
Okay.
Julia asks, do you see parallels between concerns about Kennedy and Catholicism and anti-American loyalty with Jewish people in Israel, given what's going on politically in the climate now?
Can I see parallels? Actually, repeat the question.
Do you see parallels between the concerns about Kennedy and Catholics back in his day versus the anti-American loyalty with Jews and Israel now, with everything going on with Israel and Gaza, I think is what she's referring to.
Well, I don't want to plunge into this because there's like no good ground on this in any way. Um, I do think that there's like a floating cloud of Israel equals Jewish, and that that's all the same thing, and that somehow if you're Jewish, you're anti-Gaza, and if you're Jewish, you're pro-Israel, and that assumption is very powerful and very strong, which does, parallel in many ways the idea of if you're Catholic, then you love everything the Pope does, or you whatever. All of these assumptions about who you're loyal to and what you're loyal to, and the politics of that. Sure, there are parallels. There are a lot of assumptions about people looking at larger patterns and imposing them on a person. In the case of Kennedy, he didn't, he apparently, and I didn't copy all of this down, but when I was looking at some of his words, he went out of his way when he was running to say over and over and over and over again, I look to the Pope as a spiritual leader, and that's it. I have nothing, he drew that line again and again, really, really clearly. And despite that, you can still see people merge it. It makes me, as far as Israel and Gaza goes, it makes me bonkers because people assume all kinds of things about me as a Jew, somehow missing the fact that Israel is a country, not a religion, and that as a Jew, I might have a lot of different feelings about Israel, which I do, and I might think about it really strongly one way as far as its policies are concerned that have nothing to do with my religion. But you people merge all of that together, and it does get into a question of who are these people loyal to? Jews thinking more about Israel than the United States, or the Catholics thinking more about Catholicism and the Pope than the United States. So those kind of hazes are kind of bound up. She's oodly oohing over
I can
there.
hear her now. That was the first time I heard her.
Yeah.
All of a sudden. All right. Do we have time for a couple more? Yes. Okay, Dave. That's okay.
Daniel says evangelicals thinking more about Evan. I'm sorry. That just tickles me.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, our good buddy Dave says, who has more influence in the US today, the six conservative Catholic SCOTUS judges or a Marxist Pope? Hmm.
Well, given that I don't think that the Pope is Marxist, um, that's a that has a specific definition, right? I like definitions. So that like when I if I were talking about this on Twitter, I would first define Marxist as to what it really means versus Marxist, communist, sort of throwing it around as a buzzword. But there's no answer to that question. Um, as to whether Supreme Court justices or the Pope, one outdoes the other. I mean, in the United States, we have the Supreme Court, and that's supposed to have a certain amount of power. At the moment, we're having some confusion over checks and balances and independent branches, so that's an even harder question to answer. But again, these are the kinds of questions. This is part of why I chose this topic today. These are the kinds of questions that people are going to be asking and thinking about. And at least if you're here this morning, you are primed to see how that is likely to happen, how there's a history of that happening, and how you need to pause and not assume connections that actually aren't there and seem natural to draw, but really aren't necessarily there.
Right. Julia, we've got so many of our good friends that have been with us for so long this week. Julia asks, do you see forward leaning into Christianity at the intersection of the rise of evangelicalism and evangelicanism? I can't say that word in the US.
Repeat that for me again.
Do you see moving forward, do you see forward leaning into Christianity at the intersection of the rise of evangelicalism?
Oh,
Evangelicalism.
I made you say it twice.
You
Um,
did.
yeah, I don't know. I and in the decades that I've been alive, this is a particularly pro Christian, anti-division between church and state kind of moment. So what's going to happen going forward? I don't know. On that count, I don't know. I know I'm good at worrying. I worry about a lot of things, and that's one, right? Church versus state. The fact that that's supposed to be the way things are is that the church and the state are separate, and that right now we're at a moment where that's being constantly tested, and where we're going to be in the future, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't
Okay, we have one question left. We did it. We cleared the deck for.
Wow.
Oh wait, no, we don't. They're both after party questions, and I do appreciate when people label them that way. So we did it.
Oh, look at
Deck
that. You
that
guys are
never
so
ends
advanced.
exactly on time. Look at us. Oh
That
wait,
is,
one more just popped up. Do you want to take it?
yep.
Okay, this is from Deb and Paul. They were with us almost every week as well. Given historical antipathy of evangelicals and Catholics, is their coming together over the abortion surprising?
Um, well, I know this is an easy response, but at this point, I'm not surprised by anything. I really, we live at a moment where, as far-fetched as something may seem, it then happens like 5 times in 2 hours. So I don't know if I'd say that's surprising because I think there are so many divisions in so many ways at the same time that haven't quite existed in this way before the world over. That I can't say that's surprising because I feel like I need to take 5 steps back from the playing field and sort of look before I can even pass judgment. We still ended on time, even with
We did, and we still cleared the deck, which hasn't happened in
that.
months.
In a really, really long time. I am very proud of us, and this gives me time without feeling like I have to rush, even though I
Yep.
don't say anything extra, but I will say, as I say every week, I want to thank you for engaging in the conversation of democracy on a Friday morning and coming together here as we have, our 266th time coming together. I'm trying so hard to remember the number, guys. I'm sorry, I'm so bad. I'm sure if you were to go back and look at all the past episodes, you just see me saying, "What episode is it again?" Even though I was told like 2 minutes ago. But at any rate, thank you for being here to engage in this conversation, and for doing so week after week after week. Um, this is a community. It's a community that matters to me, and I sense it's a community that matters to you folks as well. And in this time that we live in, community is up front and center, something that we should care about, as is democracy. So a community that talks about democracy, we are doing good things together. Um, I we will be here next week. I have no idea what we'll be talking about, which I've been saying that for a long time too. Who knows? Didn't think I would be talking about the Pope today. And maybe I'll be talking about the Librarian of Congress and the Library of Congress and librarians next week. That's already like in my brain, waiting to see if something else comes along and hits it out of the way. But at any rate, thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging in this and thinking about these kinds of issues. Thank you to Annie and to Claire. What was she called this morning? Carol? What did you call her by mistake?
I don't
Whatever it was. Thanks to
have enough
Claire.
coffee.
I know. Thanks to Claire. Thanks to NCHE. Thanks to Jessica, John, for helping this happen week after week after week. And for those of you who are new here, what's going to happen now is we are going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording. So we can be even freer and easier in our conversation than we were before. If you beamed in through NCHE, through their website, just stay right where you are and poof, you will be in the after party. If you are watching us, look at everyone in the chat. Poof, poof, I'm so predictable. If you're watching from Facebook, you guys make me laugh just constantly. If you're watching from Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. So on that note, I will stop talking so we can go to the after party. And those of you who don't stay here, I hopefully will see you all next week.
Yay.